going to talk into this here. Hi, everyone, and welcome back. It's day 3 of APA. I just want to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands and waters in which we are standing, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. At Photo Collective especially, we think and acknowledge that the Indigenous people of this land have been making stories through art and creativity for over 60,000 years, and we pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and any Indigenous peoples in the room today. So, yes, day 3 of APA. We are absolutely excited for this amazing talk. So we've been a bit sneaky this year, as I said yesterday in the announcements, and we've actually booked in some winners of our categories this year. So we can never do this again because it will give the game away, but we're so excited to have Christine Ward and Jake Wilton here. So Christine was on the Animal Committee. Her work is absolutely incredible, and you'll see it coming up on the screen, and she can talk to that a bit more in a minute. And Jake is the animal winner this year with his beautiful image, 1 in a Million. Jake's entered the awards over the years for we've seen your work over 5-6 years in the awards, and we're just so thrilled that he's taken out the category this year. So I'm going to hand it over to you guys. I think we're opening the floor up to questions. If you want anyone to elaborate anything as we go through, it's a warm, cozy environment, so please shout anything out as we go through, but I'll hand over to you.
Cool, awesome. All right. Hey everyone, this sounds okay? Cool. I haven't done this before, so I'm a little bit nervous, so please bear with me. So congratulations, Jake, on winning the animal category.
Thank you.
How do you feel about it?
Pretty stoked, to be honest. It's good. It's always good to have your work recognised and things, especially in this competition. I think this is one of the top competitions for photography in Australia now. It's like the standard sort of in that sort of photography realm. So to be able to take it out, it's not just a whole wildlife competition with individual categories. There's only one animal category, so to win that's pretty amazing.
The image is absolutely amazing. So I have a couple of questions. How did you capture the winning image?
It's a pretty long story. It's pretty fascinating and scary at the same time because I linked up with some friends of mine who actually were some of the people who sort of led me down the path of photography originally from back home. And they're over in a place called the Conflict Islands in Papua New Guinea, which is pretty much out off the southeastern peninsula off the coast, but it's a bit of a journey to get there. You have to sort of fly into Port Moresby, and then you overnight, and then you take another flight right down to the peninsula. Then you got to take like an overnight boat out to the islands, and then you're extremely remote in terms of accessibility to anything. And we got out there, and the guys, Haley and Ed, they've set up this the Conflict Islands Conservation Initiative, which turned poachers into conservation rangers. So the sea turtle populations there had been absolutely decimated from poaching due to the remote place and sort of lack of income, and people have to eat, so they sort of began poaching the turtles to one, eat, but also to sell for money for the community. So it was a sad story in a way where they weren't poaching just because they wanted to poach, they were poaching for survival. But she lived over there, worked with the communities, and brought a few former poachers on board as rangers. And then over the last sort of 6-7 years, has sort of, I believe 6 or 7 years, could be a little bit longer, they've sort of transformed that view there and working with the communities to make it quite a successful project. I believe over the summer this year, they successfully hatched off their beaches like 26,000 hatchlings or something. So they went from nearly nothing to then. And then through genetic studies, they actually found that the turtles are from Australia, from the Great Barrier Reef. So it's all linked. So they're doing incredible work. So I went over there to help document that and just do some photos for them, just because they're so busy, they don't really have the time to do much photography these days. And then they're also doing a manta ray project over there, Project Manta, which is an international organisation. They found a new manta ray population there. So I went to help build that and document that, and then sort of give them a bit of advice on the IDing of their manta rays and best ways to approach it, like scuba and free diving things. or just to help out in any way I can. They have a pretty good idea on it already because the project manager guys are so experienced, but it's good to sort of help there because I used to do that in WA as well. And then basically from there we're doing the releases, and then they just happened to have a leucistic green sea turtle hatchling at the time, so I got incredibly lucky, extremely lucky to even see
extremely
one,
rare.
to have and then have the camera, and then to be able to take a photograph of it, and yeah, so I got lucky there, and then pretty much the same day I got I think it was the same day I got the photo. It could have been the next day, that morning. Papua New Guinea actually had a fuel crisis nationwide, and Papua is quite a let's say wild place, I guess. It's very, very full on, very raw, and can be very dangerous. So it's safe in places, but can be very dangerous in places too, especially in like a national emergency like that.
Yeah.
So we got wind through there's some friends of theirs who worked in the government, so they were denying it in public, but then on the inside they said we're only 2 days away from nationwide fuel outages, like for planes, for everything, and then if that happens, it just sort of descends into chaos, as you'd mentioned.
Yeah.
So we had to then scramble. We managed to have one boat there with enough fuel, so we had to scramble trying to change flights to reorganise. There was me, one of the donors, and the manta ray researcher. So we had to scramble, make the decision to like, do we risk it and stay? We could be stuck there for months, or try and get back. So after much scrambling, we tried to get back, and we went that next morning. We had the fastest boat in the province, so we had to go through like pirate waters and stuff.
Oh my goodness.
And this is one boat trying to intercept us on one of the days, and the captain said it wasn't a pirate, but they kept looking at each other, and we went a bit faster when the boat was coming. So I'm assuming it could have been pirates, or who knows. Then we made it, got the last flight out of the province, and made it back to Moresby. The girls got out of there, and then my flight, I had to wait till the next morning, and then got to the airport, and then nothing was happening. And then I met the pilot sitting at the gate, and they were like, I don't think there's any fuel. I think we're buggered. And so that went on for hour. Every hour they were updating, saying just been delayed an hour, technical issues and stuff. And then at the same time they were doing press releases saying there's no fuel outages, there's nothing happening. And there was the pilots were a bit nervous and stuff as well because of what can happen. Port Moresby's quite a dangerous place, you know. And
Lots of stress.
yeah, a lot of stress. And then we ended up getting on, I think the plane meant to fly at 7 a.m. I think I got like the 3 or 4 p.m. where they found a plane. And then they just said that the pilot didn't turn up to work that could fly that plane, so I had to find another one that could fly this plane. They just made something up, you know. It was like, oh, I actually met the pilots, you know. Classic. But yeah, so it was actually a little bit scary at the time because it can get real very quickly, you know. So that's a story behind it. So the image itself is quite rare in the fact that it's a leucistic turtle.
What's the difference between leucistic and albino?
They're very similar. The best way to tell is their eyes. So leucism is a genetic mutation where they lack the ability to produce melanin, so they come across as white, whereas albinism is where they lack the ability to produce any pigment, which is why they don't have the colour in their eyes.
Yeah.
So it's similar. So I believe like the Migaloo whale I think that's actually leucistic, I think, not albino, but that's the way to sort of tell the difference. But extremely rare, and especially for sea turtles, like you got to imagine, I think it's only 1 in 1,000 hatchlings survive.
That's amazing.
So then imagine being a little white turtle, you get spotted by birds, fish,
How did you
sharks.
react when you first saw that turtle?
I was gobsmacked.
Were you just like, oh no, I have to take the photo?
I knew straight away, like the opportunity, you know, coming from like a marine background and nature background, I knew straight away how rare and amazing it was, and then trying to capture it. I think I was lucky I had that a few years experience before, and I've shot hatchlings before in the Great Barrier Reef, and it's so difficult. So I knew the lens choice, knew the setup.
So what kind of gear do you actually have to use for that sort
So
of
I've got the Nikon Z8,
Yep.
thankfully, because the autofocus is incredible. So it was, you know, the hatchlings are only sort of this big. So to try and grab that can be very difficult, especially when they're moving quickly, and then they come up on the surface where the turtle is, you know, with the reflections, so you have to angle it right. But
What time of day did you take the photo?
the late afternoon.
Late afternoon.
Yeah, oh, sorry,
Oh.
the early morning. Late afternoons when everything went down, yeah.
Yeah, okay, right,
Sorry,
right,
the
right.
morning, yeah. They normally do like the hatchling releases in the afternoons,
Yep, yep.
but they also do some in the morning. So basically they go around to all the islands and they will make sure the adults nest, protect them while they're nesting, and then they'll move the eggs to the one island so they can patrol and protect them.
Yeah.
And then they like all in these little pens. So when they hatch, they get ready and they take them to the beach, and then they go off on their little adventure. So
Yeah.
they sort of you can time it. So I knew that was about to happen, so
Yeah.
we could sort of do
A
that.
little
But
bit of preparation.
yeah. But so then I used the 14 to 24 millimeter.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a bit wider. I always find it's better to sort of shoot it a little bit wider because they can move so quickly and stuff
Yeah.
to get it. And then, of course, you have the underwater housing with the big dome port and then the lights.
Yeah, there's so
and
many
stuff.
things that you have to take into consideration with that.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about, underwater photography, so whenever I see all these people going underwater and stuff, I'm just like, how do you deal, with the nerves? Like, are you ever worried if something's going to happen? Like, if your gear's going to get affected? Or yeah, exactly.
Sometimes if it's with sharks, like especially in certain situations with sharks, bait balls or tiger sharks and stuff, or, large predatory sharks, you should always have a buddy or someone you trust in the water to keep eyes on, especially with a camera, right? Because you sort of got eyes on the camera, but you got to be alert. I think I'm lucky in the fact that I worked in the industry for a long time before actually getting a camera. So I worked with sharks for almost 8-10 years with
Wow.
large sharks, and then living on Ningaloo, there's a lot of sharks over there in WA. Yeah, well, I actually feel more comfortable in the water. Yeah, I always, like snakes on the land, I go to jelly, like.
I love coming
Yeah.
across them, to be honest. Like, I'm a little bit afraid of them, but whenever I see them, I'm just like, great. I don't
Not
know.
me. I get scared, but in
But,
the water,
yeah.
I love them.
Yeah,
The
see,
sea
I feel like
snake,
if
yeah.
I was like underwater, like I'd be like, oh no, sharks. What do I do, sort of thing. So it's kind of like flipped in a way. Sort of
Yeah,
thing.
it's different. Yes, yeah. Well, I just feel maybe it's a more comfortable. You have that sort of 360-degree world, I guess. Like you can sort of go around. Whereas on the land, I don't know. They just maybe it's from trauma, from documentaries and stuff. Steve Irwin or something.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, I
But,
guess like
yeah.
because you've been working with it for so long as well, like you've kind of you have this understanding of their behavior and stuff as well in a way, I guess.
Yeah,
maybe?
I think that's key. We briefly touched on this in a previous chat. Like, I was lucky in the fact that, as I said, like I got into photography later on, so I was always obsessed with the behaviour of the animals and being able to get as close as I can and to watch them, without disturbing them. So you sort of develop those skills over time. So then once you sort of pick up the camera, you sort of pretty much just learning how to use the camera and just using that knowledge you had previously to do it.
Yeah, I think with photography, like getting to know the animal and the behavior is one of the most fun things because they're all so different. And then I've only been doing photos for probably like 5 years or something, but it's like such a magical sort of feeling, like just knowing or like learning about their behaviors, and then like they're also individual as well. I just think it's great.
Yeah, I think for you too, as a, I'm not sure how different it is. I don't do a lot of bird photography and stuff, but I feel like birds is, you really have to know their habits, their habitat
Yeah.
to anticipate them.
Their habits and their calls, that's a really big thing. Like before I go birding, I hop onto eBird. I don't know if you guys know about it. But they have these little recordings for their calls and stuff, and it's for different, like let's say if there's like a predator or something, they've recorded that there, then calls like songs or whatever. Like I try to teach myself like what that stuff is, so that way if I hear something in the distance, I'm like, have to go to that area, and then yeah, it's kind of like funny, like it's just like for example, noisy miners. I don't know if you guys really have them here in Melbourne.
I'm not sure. We got them in New South. Noisy miners. Those ones are the yellow ones.
Yeah. A lot of people get confused with the Indian miners and stuff, but for example, with the noisy miners, I can kind of differentiate when they're talking about people or predators or just going about doing their thing or talking to babies and stuff like that. I mean, I'm not 100%, but I'm pretty certain because like wherever I go, I'm always trying to observe the creatures, behavior and their calls, because I don't know, I kind of like being like in their little realm, if you know what I mean. It's like a magical thing, and being able to understand their behavior, I think is great, and it also makes you appreciate them a lot more too. So, yeah. Sorry? Good question. Like to me, it's just like if I'm walking around, like people, they're just like like they're doing that call where they're like people like sort of thing. Oh. That's cute. That's cute. That's cute. But yeah, like that part of it is really fun. So.
Yeah.
eBird, yeah. So it's like this online database where you can. It goes into like a lot of like research, and people are aware of numbers, and you can record. You can make these like little lists where if you see like a creature, you can record it there. So for like it's like good for observations if you want to find creatures, and for scientists and stuff. Like has a lot of information on there. I've been using it since late 2019, and for example, people can create hotspots on there, and then you can go through the list, and then there's like little information stuffs about the species, and it's really, really good. It's really handy. So if you want to get into birding or learn about birds and their calls and stuff, I highly recommend it. But there is this one thing I should mention. There's a lot of people who try to lure birds by so on the website, say they have like songs and calls, and so for example, using it during springtime, it can confuse birds. So there's a little bit of like this ethics sort of thing associated with birding, which I think is really important to understand, because if you use it too much, then it can, interfere with, the male bird. They'll like get their hopes up, and then they're just like, oh, it's actually just a phone. And then, like some birds could potentially get stressed out if it's like a male call or something, because they're just like, oh, crap, So it's definitely a good idea to be mindful of that sort of stuff when using those calls. Just thought I'd like mention that little thing. So,
Have you always been into bird photography? Is that how you got into it?
So I've always loved birds. Like for example, when I was drawing a lot when I was really young, my mum, she always used to buy these bird colouring in books. So I think my fascination kind of started there. And growing up, I did have like a cockatiel. Personally, I don't think I could ever have a bird anymore as a pet unless it was, it had some kind of like neurological sort of problem, or it needed help or something. But there was like that fascination there. Then my mum introducing like all that art stuff with that. And like I also, sorry if I like rant on. I have ADHD brain, so my brain is just going to be like, but like I've always appreciated them, and then I've always had a fascination with photography, so I guess it kind of like went hand in hand with that. But I started properly bird watching back in, when was that? 2018, when I used to live in Norway. And it was kind of like a really relaxing sort of thing for me. So I kind of like I wanted to document it, and also I wanted to show my appreciation for the natural world and share it with people, sort of thing. So
Amazing.
Yeah.
I'm just about to take the plunge into it, I think.
Yeah.
I started doing a little bit of bird stuff, but I just got the new 400mm lens, so
it always makes me so excited
we'll
when people
see
say
what
that.
happens.
I'm always like, yes.
It's a slippery slope, hey. I love watching birds and
It's
learning calls and stuff, and
It's
then
amazing.
it's like one day you don't care, next day you have a bird
There's
book,
all
then
these
you got
memes
binoculars.
around that as
and-
well. It's like,
Yeah.
you get it to a certain age, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, bird watching, cool, sort of thing. So,
Yeah.
and it like is such a thing that brings you into the moment. For like that's like birding for me is like such a like it's like a mindfulness sort of thing. So I can definitely encourage people to get more into that sort of thing. So I hope it's gonna be a good thing for you as well.
I get obsessed with everything I do, I think. I have to be careful.
Yeah, and then hopefully I can start to do some like underwater stuff, because I have been intrigued by that sort of stuff, but I'm just like, where do I start?
It is tough. Right? I guess like starting out, I get a lot of people reach out through social media, like about underwater photography, and I think the best advice I could probably give them is just from my own experiences, just learn to dive and be comfortable in the water first, you know, like master those dive skills, or just being comfortable and aware of behaviours and things, because I think you can see it in certain photographers, their background. If you have someone that's come from like the dive background and then started photography, they have a completely different approach to photography and the wildlife than somebody that was doing photography and then started going into underwater afterwards, because they're usually more camera orientated rather than wildlife orientated, and like they do evolve and change. But I always say, just get used to the water and be comfortable, because there's a lot going on when you're diving. You've got gear. If it's scuba diving, you've got gear everywhere, currents, visibility, animals, like noise.
Just a lot going on.
Free diving's a whole nother ball game, because you're snorkeling, then you got to hold your breath, and then it's like you can't go down and position yourself. You know, a lot of the time you got to like set yourself up mentally. Where am I going to go? And you usually got to anticipate the wildlife. So when I used to do the manta ray ID shots in Coral Bay, in Ningaloo Reef, quite often be swimming for like an hour, like as a guide, and then you got to like free dive down like 10 meters, but you can't just swim at the ray because they get spooked. So you have to.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask
Yeah.
that. Like, when you go into the water, like, do you notice that they're like immediately like, and then they kind of disperse? Like with a lot of
It
different
can do.
creatures?
It really depends on, probably similar to birds, it really depends on the animals and how you are in the water. I'm very slow.
That's
I'm
really the
notoriously
best way.
slow.
No,
Yeah.
I think that's the best way to approach creatures, because like I often have a lot of people asking me like, how do you take photos of crows, for example? Because they are always just like, they just like fly away really quickly. But I think that's key, like moving slow, because any fast sort of movement, they'll just be like, predator sort of thing.
It's the
So,
same underwater, because
Yeah.
everything eats everything underwater.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what it is, something's going to get eaten by something. You know, eventually that's sort of how everything ends up. So they can be very apprehensive about people. So, you know, for instance, if you're seeing like a turtle or something, quite often if people are sort of newer into that world, they might just sort of see any turtle and then
Go
basically
straight.
swim at it.
Yeah.
But then if you're swimming at something, you know, obviously they're like, oh my God, what's this giant thing swimming at me? And then they swim away.
Yeah.
Whereas like if you sort of, what my approach would be is sort of like look at a few turtles, you know, you can sort of tell from a while away. If they're sort of looking at you like, oh Jesus, what's that? Then you're like,
So you
okay,
can
I'm
kind of
gonna hang
tell
back.
like immediately, like they're a little bit like on edge. They're kind of just like,
Yeah, and I think maybe that's just from time in the water, or maybe that attention to detail, looking for that. But you can sort of work with them, and sometimes I used to treat it as a bit of a game. Sometimes where you're like, oh, I'm going to see if I can break this animal and get
totally,
really close.
Totally, I totally
Yeah.
get that, because when I try to, it's so interesting because there is some like similar dynamics in terms of that. But like, for example, there's a lot of creatures where they're, so how do I word this? There's a lot of animals that are fine with people, and then there's like a lot of birds that are kind of more skittish than others. So I kind of try to, so this is like something that I try to tell people if they want to take photos of birds. You don't want to like make direct eye contact with them, because then if they see like both of your eyes, they're kind of just like, predator. And I try not to go straight towards them either. I kind of go in like a diagonal sort of thing whilst kind of turning my head away, so they're just like, okay, come, whatever.
I do
But
that
yeah,
with
I try.
sharks actually.
Yeah, really.
Yeah,
So it
close
is
my
really
eyes so they
similar.
can't see my eyes. And then if you close your eyes, I used to
And
do
then
it
just hope for the best.
at a shark cleaning station in
Yeah,
WA.
yeah,
And if
yeah.
you dive down and wait, they would take like a minute or so to come back. If you dive down, close your eyes and just wait, and then open them, they'll be like on top of you.
They're just
basically.
so like attuned to everything. Like I
Yeah.
always get so fascinated with creatures because they just know. But I mean, like it is the natural world, so they kind of just have to be,
survival,
straight onto
eh?
it. Yeah. But when I do go birding, I'm like, all right, let's see how close I can get. But I don't want to, get too close and stress it out, because that's like another thing that I just want to make sure that the creatures don't get spooked or anything. So
Yeah, I actually had it with a cassowaries. I don't know if you've photographed.
cassowaries,
Have you
I love.
photographed them before?
No, but I'd love to. I don't want to be too close.
Yeah, well,
but I'd
yeah.
love to see them.
They're
so.
big buggers, but you like up in there's a few spots where I went around up like North Queensland, this trip that I've been on now, and like looking, and then there's a few that were half curious but didn't want to pay any attention, and it sort of went on for a bit. But it's like every animal, similar to like sharks. Sometimes you just see one where you're like, oh, this is the one I can work with, you know, just their personality. And then I found one in the Daintree. We were crossing a bridge and then looked down the creek, and there was one just like eating fruits out of the creek.
Oh.
And I was like, oh my God, like this is it.
Yeah.
And then so jumped out, like no shoes, nothing, straight through the creek, all the way in. And then the cassowary just like was just straight onto me, like didn't give a bugger, just like eyed me off and come over. And then I was thinking, oh, aren't cassowaries meant to be dangerous, you know? Where it's like, but I'm used to everyone saying things are dangerous when they're not that dangerous, you know? It's more like they're potentially dangerous. Turns out they've only actually ever been responsible for one human fatality.
Right.
Accident back in like the 30s or 20s or something. I think they stepped on somebody's neck or something by accident.
Right. There you go.
But so they don't. But they do get defensive and stuff, you know. So you got to be aware of that. But that was, you know, usually birds are quite shy, as you probably know.
Yes.
And so it was a little bit intimidating having this big bird like eyeing you off.
Yeah.
And then like, and because you're down low on the water.
Yeah.
But I think the shot's actually in the slideshow somewhere. If you see the cassowary with the fruit, that was on there. And then it didn't really care. But so it's interesting. Like you probably see it a lot with birds. It's like certain birds would be fearful of people.
Yes.
Other birds are probably used to them. So that's what I sort of look for in wildlife stuff as well. You know, like especially underwater, it's like picking that one animal, and then knowing that moment, you're like, oh, this is it. You know, sometimes it could take a month to get there, or a couple of years, but then eventually you get that moment where, oh, this is it. This is the animal I can work with and do it.
Super satisfying.
Do you use any other things when you go out for your conservation work and underwater photography? Do you have anybody with like a drone or anything that will pick up areas where you've got your animals in that you can get into an area and photograph?
Usually I just do it by myself, or if you're traveling with someone, I have a drone and things as well. But a lot of research, I think I do a lot of research in terms of like the habitat, the area, and look at like articles online, like where people most likely are going to see them more commonly, just to try and maximise your chances. Places like Ningaloo, it's like the Garden of Eden, you know, you just send a drone up and you're like, oh yeah, tiger shark, manta ray, dugong, you know, it's just like take your pick basically. And certain things you can use to your advantage. There's a really cool app that I'd recently found for wildlife called iNaturalist, which is like
That one's great.
similar to the bird one.
And it has like a lot of like floral stuff as well,
Yeah,
insects
yeah.
and everything. So
It's basically like a
that one's really,
citizen
really good.
science sort of app, and then it's like maps, and then so they'll pinpoint the location of like an animal they sighted, so I have the date, the time. So then you can sort of zoom out and look at the areas and look at clusters where people more frequently see the certain animals. So I used it for the tree kangaroos recently up in North Queensland.
Actually, question. Sorry, I just have to say this. Have you seen a greater glider?
The greater glider.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually have a really cool spot in
I love
back home in New South Wales, up in the mountains. I got a spot where you camp and they glide over the top of your thing, and we get a lot of, because they eat eucalypt leaves like a koala. I don't know if you knew that. So
I didn't actually, but that's good to know.
yeah, so the habitat disturbance, if it's like logging the old growth forests, they're more susceptible because of the hollows they need, but they can actually still survive on the on the sort of cleared state forest where they sort of leave younger trees because they can still eat. They serve their food source.
That's their primary food source?
I believe so. Yeah. I mean, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure they eat eucalypt
So that's
leaves.
also another creature that would rely on flying foxes actually,
Yeah. Right.
because flying foxes, they help disperse like seas and
Yeah,
all of that, and so it's kind of like the koala is reliant on flying foxes, so because they're like a key species. So I didn't know that. Sorry, like it was just like interesting. I didn't know that they're. Well, we can talk about like the whole flying fox like keystone species thing. I'm like I just love them, but yeah, keep going.
But
I'm
yeah,
just
no,
getting way
there's
too
a great
excited.
spot up. I think basically from Melbourne, like the southern ranges down here, all the way up New South Wales, I think is good. But they're usually higher elevation. But back in that place, that you can usually find like the white morphs, the dark morphs, and then the.
Love to see one day. That's on
They're
my
weird
list.
creatures. They got real big ears.
Yeah, you know, like the first time I saw like a photo of one, I was like, "Is that real?" And it
Yeah.
is.
And they're quite big.
Yeah,
For a
just
flying
beautiful.
possum.
Yeah.
It's quite incredible
Just
how they can
beautiful.
fly, you know. Like,
And their
or
tails
glide,
are so long as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So long.
So do you think that, like with photography wise, would you push more into wildlife from birds, or you're stuck with birds forever?
I mean, I do love my birds, but I do definitely want to like branch out more. But yeah, well, just like because I feel like I'm still so early on with the whole photography stuff. Like, there's still so much time to do that. But I would love to photograph more creatures. Like, for example, when I'm in Norway, I love taking. So I go there quite a fair bit. So kind of like my life is like half here and then half in Norway, and I love coming across the little red squirrels. And they are just the cutest little things, and I don't know, I just want to take photos of all different animals, just because they're just so beautiful. But birds, I think because, you know, in Brisbane there's so many species there, it's a lot easier to come across them as well. Like, there's just, the diversity is insane, so I think maybe that's like a thing. But yeah,
Maybe
definitely.
if you get into underwater, Norway's like one of the best places in the world for orcas to swim with killer
See,
whales.
that would
you
be
know?
amazing. I think
Yeah.
I'd be a little bit intimidated coming across them, but I think it'll just be, I think if I saw one, I think I would cry from happiness just because of how
Yeah, yeah.
beautiful they are. Like, there's been so many instances where I've like, yeah, come across a lot of creatures, and yeah, I think I just like feel like that love for them so much. Well, that's the thing, is like, I just love them, and they all have their like personalities. So yeah, it's just magical to me. So yeah,
Yeah, amazing.
definitely, yeah. But
I was going to ask, actually, well, I think that sort of personality sort of made me think of like your style of work, because I think we have very different styles per se. I've never been one to like try for a style, I guess. I'm not the most artistic or creative person, I guess. I sort of just let the wildlife do the talking,
but your
sort of
stuff is
thing. But
amazing.
where like I really admire your work, and like it's very like almost like like cinematography in a way, like cinema style.
It's like yeah,
yeah.
like the color grading.
Yeah, so do you go when you're shooting, when you're doing the photos out in the field, do you have that end result in mind, that particular style, or do you sort of work more
Yeah,
in
I
post-production?
do, because I feel like for example, all of my images, I mean, like, it's all like different lighting conditions and stuff, so it's something that I try to take into consideration, and like the colors, what colors will go well with what I'm taking photos of there, like I've made my own sort of like presets and stuff on Lightroom and but yeah, I try to have that in consideration, just because it can be a bit hard sometimes to color correct certain things and yeah, I just try to see how I go with it.
Yeah,
So,
interesting.
yeah.
Because the color correction side of things is so important for underwater.
It is.
Like because you're with the white balance, you can never get it right. I usually use manual white balance underwater, but like if you even move this way with the sun or go down another
Yeah, I imagine it
meter,
would be
you lose
quite
your colour.
hard, like with lighting and everything too.
Yeah, and then
Do you
you've
have
got
like
strobes and
anything?
natural
Yeah,
light.
okay. I was gonna say,
Yeah.
like, what kind of like lighting equipment would you use?
Well, it just depends. So I shoot natural light a lot.
Yep.
That's where I started, just natural light.
Yeah.
Because Ningaloo is so shallow and clear.
Yeah.
And then progressed on to using the flash, or so strobes, which is just like a flash basically, but they're connected through,
Yeah.
and which I use them a bit now. But it just depends on what animal I'm shooting, or the depth really. If it's within that sort of first 5 meters, even to 10 meters, I'll usually just shoot natural light, or and then if it's scuba diving, I'll take the strobes down, because you need to get the detail and the
Yeah.
color and stuff back.
Yeah, it's so different to like.
Oh yeah,
Would I?
yeah.
You have to be really considerate of using strobes underwater.
That's what I was
Yes,
thinking as well.
Yeah, coming from a guide background, I used to be the one that always took photographers diving, and it actually put me off photography of underwater for a long time, because you sort of see that not a lot of people. Well, hopefully, it does change, and there is a lot of good people, but some people do sort of put the photos before the animals and stuff. So I think it's more. I just try to not take the shot until I really need to, just sort of hit that one moment, because some animals they don't care, they don't give a bugger, and then other animals will spook them straight away. But so I think it's the same, going back to the same thing of like reading the behaviour, and just being considerate. I mean, if you got a turtle and it's sleeping, you go down with a flash and boom, 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 it's poor things like in a disco or something. You know, like it must affect them. So like everyone's seen Nemo, you know, where the diver takes the phone. He's like, whoa.
Yeah.
I imagine it's the same.
I was actually going to ask that as well.
With animals or with, yeah, a few. I better be careful. Mum and Dad are here, so can't tell them too much. Yeah. Yeah, I'd actually say as a guide and I've actually had more, I suppose, say terrifying or scary moments just from currents and conditions and things, you know, being like pushed down, like pinned down at 30 meters and stuff from down currents and like diver separation and then people getting swept away. You got to be very alert as a guide. I was fortunate to grow up on the mid-north coast, a place called Southwest Rocks, and there's a dive site there called Fish Rock Cave. And I suppose for like training, like I couldn't have worked or like learned to dive in a better place because you've got like the depths, the bad visibility, the surges, the swells, the currents, everything. So that probably scares me more so than the sharks and things like that. But I get really nervous about humpback whales. Actually, I don't know why. They're just so big and we're like a little fly. And I've had a close call before with a whale. But sharks wise, I've definitely had a few moments over the years. I still remember the first time a tiger shark turned and come straight at me.
Is it easy to pick an aggressive shark over
Well, they're not so much aggressive. I mean, I usually just say to people, yeah, it's more just like, yeah, territorial in a way, but more over like a food source or something like that. Like with the tiger sharks, the first one that ever came towards me, I pooped in myself, you know, to have this, 4 meter thing with a face coming at you. But nowadays, I'm very comfortable with it. You know, you sort of hold your ground. I've had to redirect a few over the years, but it's more gentle curiosity. But then you just sort of have that feeling of you have to sort of read the room a bit. You know, like I've had times where I've definitely like, no, this isn't, get out of the water. It's not right. You know, you can just feel it. Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's usually like a last resort. I think I've had to do it a few times, especially on the bait balls and things, because when there's a feeding frenzy, they're flying in at you. It's more just like pushing them off. Probably the craziest story was just like off the coast of WA with silky sharks, and there was fishermen that were fishing for tuna, and then they caught a tuna. We're just floating out in the blue, but the silky sharks wanted the fish, and then they couldn't get it, so they came like in really hot, and they're very, I'd say very curious, I guess, is a way to put it. But I remember like one come at me, they sort of went for this guy who kicked a lot of bubbles, and I thought, oh, he looks like he's in a bit of trouble. So I went to swim to him, and then he somehow just disappeared, and then I was left there, and I remember just having like 6, 7, 8 sharks on me. I had one by the nose, like, oh my God, like one ramming me, and I was like flopping around. I couldn't lift my head up to be like, help, you know? And I was just pretty much like eyes on, like pushing them away. And then afterwards, I just had boardies on too, like nothing silly. And then, but it can't happen like in a blink of an eye. Not so much like aggressive. They just, if one of them thinks you got food and the other one comes, they're going in to get the food, you know? So afterwards, I was like, oh my God, like surely I've been bitten somehow. But they didn't know. They were just like looking. Maybe they got a glimpse, like a reflection off the camera housing or something. I'm not too sure. But that was probably the only time I've ever felt like I've been bitten here or something like that. But the rest of the time, you have behaviours where they can be, I guess you could call it aggressive in a way, but never in a way like they're going to attack me. It's more like curiosity. And people can mistake that a lot too. You know, if a shark swims up to you, they're like, oh my God, because they're not used to it. Whereas they can just be quite curious, you know. But the tiger sharks especially, because they're very, very big animals, you know, and they have a face that's
How
like,
big do they get to?
I think up to 4.5, 5 meters or something, like huge, very big. I remember there was one tiger shark I got in with once. It was actually my ex-partner. I put her in before I got in. She was like, "Oh, I'll get in." It was feeding on these dead fish on the surface. There was a big anoxic event, and on the tide line there was dead animals from the reef, like dead fish from the reef. So they just swim around like goldfish, just like gulping. And I was like, "This is insane." I was like, "You get in first, and then she, if you wanted," because I was driving. She loves sharks and stuff, and she got in. She was like, "Oh, I don't know about this shark," and it was big, like really, really big, probably one of the biggest tiger sharks I've ever seen. I was like, all right. And I was like, don't be a wuss, you'll be all right, you know. Silly, like it was very safe, very shallow, clear. It wasn't aggressive or anything. And then it turned and come and looked at her and stuff. And she was like, oh, I don't know about that thing. And then I ended up getting in them, but the next day it was the same shark. Turns out it was like a local shark or local that comes every year. And I got in with it on the tour. And my boss was like, oh, is it a good one for people to get in with and stuff? And I was just like, I don't know about this thing. Like straight away I was like, nah. I just had this weird feeling. It was wild, these big black eyes and like just very intimidating. Like she was the top dog
Yeah.
in her world. Like there was nothing bigger than her, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was intimidating. That's probably the time where I've been like, I've got to get out of the water, I think. But it is, yeah. No cage, just snorkeling and stuff. Yeah. No, just in the water. Yeah. Snorkeling with the sharks. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
The photo with the seal, where you did half under the water, you
Yeah.
were talking about it a little bit yesterday.
Yeah.
What happens with that, with the half underwater, half above?
So it's basically you use like a dome port. So if you've seen the underwater housings on cameras, obviously the camera's inside a case and you have the opening for the lens to go through. They have what's called a dome port. So it's like basically like a fruit bowl, I guess, but they're glass. So if you can have the bigger, the better, essentially. So if you have a small one, it's quite difficult because the water can move a lot. But if it's bigger, there's more surface areas, so you can sort of have both. So basically, you just hold it half in the water. If this is the surface here, you just sort of hold it like that. So you have both the underwater and the surface to shoot. So you've got to focus underwater and then have the aperture, 16 at 22 or something, so you can get everything behind in focus. Yeah, it can warp, but you sort of got to angle it and stuff. And fisheye lenses are good to use for it, or like wide angles, I think is the best way. But it can be tricky, like very, very tricky, and usually need like really calm like conditions, like basically glass off water is the best to do. But yeah, there's some incredible photographers that specialise in it, and yeah, they've got like these mega domes, like these giant things, and they float around. I think on the BBC documentary they got this custom made one for a giant, just one of those big sloth things. Sloths, those little slow.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but it was swimming. Like it must be in South America. And then behind the scenes, they had this giant dome. So they got like this half shot of this sloth like swimming through the water. And I was like, wild. How? Yeah. So like the bigger the better. But
That's so
yeah,
cute.
yeah, it's different.
Focus on the animal in the water.
Yeah.
Really like stop down aperture 16.
Yeah. So generally you'll need the flash to light up underwater. To do it and to freeze the motion too, because your shutter speed, you can't really push it to a fast shutter speed. But with wildlife, obviously like a seal, they're moving around a lot. So that was a really tricky shot. I think it took about 800 photos or something, but I didn't actually have a flash. That was just without a little torch, and it was just very lightly lighting because I didn't want to disturb them. They're quite sensitive eyes as well. So that was one of the times where I didn't use a flash. I just did that, but it made it very challenging because you're pushing the shutter speeds pretty slow for the wildlife itself, so you have to wait for them to stop, and then with your hands shaking and freezing in the water and things. But yeah, it's a very cool technique. I think it's a very good image. I do it a lot for my commercial work when I do resorts and things. Like it gives you that connection from like our world to the underwater world, in that one image. So like if you're doing like resort reefs and stuff, you can get like the reef or a turtle with the land in the background. It gives you that connection and that sense of like the viewer being like, oh, I can relate to that. I can go and experience that myself, rather than just a general underwater image. Sometimes it seems a bit unobtainable for people to see that themselves. Yeah.
I think animal photography is like my main thing, but I have delved into a little bit of like portraiture, live music shots, and I have started doing a little bit of like wedding photography, which, oh my goodness, it is so stressful.
Oh, yeah.
Have to have backups of backups. It's just like, actually with my last like wedding the lens died. And that was 24 to 70. But then I had to like shoot with like a 50 millimeter for the rest of it. Thankfully, it turned out okay. I had to just be calm. I was like, you know what, just got to work with the gear that I have. But yeah, I try to do lots of other stuff, and I'm kind of intrigued with doing a bit of street photography, just because it's just interesting once again to see how like people act and do their stuff, you know, and yeah. It would be really fun. So
Yeah, for me, I do a lot. So I started underwater primarily, and then I just sort of had that thought of like living on the reef over there. It's obviously you can work. There's a lot of job opportunities for underwater photography, but then I thought to myself, like, if I leave here, which I eventually did, could I still consider myself a photographer or like get work places and things? So I started getting more, actually thanks to COVID, you know, because no one could travel, I started getting a bit more tourism work. So it was more ocean tourism that sort of went into a bit more travel, and then that led into what I do a lot now is like resort work, so like luxury resorts and things. You always go luxury because it's better perks, you know, good food and stuff, good beds, good food, good places. But it's actually easier to shoot. I have a lot more fun with that. On that commercial side, I've actually really started to enjoy it now. I don't really post a lot of that content like on social media, but on my website you can see it. There's like a commercial page so you can see sort of what you do. But that sort of tourism, travel, having like a model or talent in there. And same thing as what I was talking about with the underwater stuff, like creating that link with the half-half shots. It's the same thing, like putting a person in there so people can relate, like, oh, that could be me, you know? And it's really fun when you try and do it with the wildlife, because a lot of the times now with the resorts, like I've been to the Maldives a few times with different resorts, and that's really fun because they want a lot of underwater content, but you have to mix it with that like lifestyle, including a person in it, and so they can then sell that to their potential clients or guests to come in. So it makes it a good challenge. And then so I shoot a wide variety of stuff. I've done like shot campaigns for, like watches and backpacks and shoes and wine. That was good. You got a lot of free wine. And all sorts of things. Hey, and at the moment I'm doing a lot of photos. I'm traveling around for the rest of the year around Australia in my car. And so I'm doing stuff like the canopy on the back of the car is like a partnership, and then with the fridge and the stovetop and things and suspension. So you sort of do a bit of everything. But the true passion, probably similar to you, is still like the wildlife stuff. Is still, you know, and I've started diving into actual wildlife photography, and that's like, it humbles you very quick when you start a new type of photography. I think you learn pretty quickly you're not very good. And
you have to like relearn everything. You're like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's very difficult, eh?
Yeah, because I've like tried to do a little bit of videography and that, as well as like a whole thing.
Yeah, I stay away from videos, eh?
See,
I try to.
it's so hard because it's like, working with all of that, like the color grading as well is like completely different with that too.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, oh my goodness. And it's like less forgiving, I guess.
And you have to do one or the other, I think, with the video. You're either doing video or you're doing photos. So if I have commercial clients, sometimes they want both. I'm just like, well, bring a videographer with me or something, you know? Like, if you got budget, like, I'll bring someone else. Because it's very difficult to do both roles at the same time, especially probably
you kind of like have to like
weddings
balance
and things.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Because you can't ask them, can you put the ring on again or something? You know, the wedding, like,
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
It's so stressful.
but yeah, lots of different types of photography, hey? But
Yeah.
yeah.
And then there's like the whole thing with like social media and then the push for reels.
Yes.
I think that's like kind of a conflicting thing.
Yeah, it's interesting like how you find social media, because for me it's like I get a lot of work through it, but I'm not really the biggest fan of social media and the way it, I know the sort of way it works, but it's like a necessary evil in a way.
Exactly.
Like, do you find that with your work?
Yeah, definitely. Like, you know, there's that thing where you just have to keep like uploading like all the time, and then you start to feel that pressure sort of thing. Like, it's been very beneficial, and it's given me a lot of awesome opportunities. Like, for example, this whole thing, which has been really nice. But yeah, like, you know, like forcing art, I think, it can be a little bit intense sometimes. And especially because everything's kind of going towards that videography, like real sort of thing, it can be pretty exhausting. So I find that sometimes I just have to shut off completely to it, because it does require quite a fair bit of mental energy, and then having to edit all the time, and you kind of want to have a break. And yeah, that's kind of.
Yeah, I find that the same. I've been pretty slack with social media the last sort of 12 months for that reason. But I actually found now it's starting to create more work for photographers again because all these influencers and content creators are all doing these videos, and all of a sudden, it's a couple of years on. They're like a lot of the places like, oh my god, we don't have any new photos, but no one can do photos, so they have to use photographers again.
Yeah.
So it's actually sort of circling back, which is really cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's one of those things. Social media. I think it can affect the photography side of things too. Like that's why I so admire your work so much, is because it's very uniquely, distinctly yours. Like it's who you are. So you're not trying to be anyone else. And that's sort of my aim as a photographer. When I first started, I'm just going to do what I want to do, and if someone likes it, then new beauty. If they don't, then well.
That's kind of like how I've approached it as well.
Yeah.
Like in a way, that's like because I wanted to do this, like whole photography thing for like. I mean, the appreciation. It comes from appreciation for nature and stuff, but I also wanted to do it for me as well, because I used to upload a lot of. So I'm a tattoo artist mainly, and I have like a social media, an Instagram for that. But I think I started to get a little bit. I started to feel too much pressure because I deal with a fair bit of like perfectionism and imposter syndrome and stuff. It's a little bit awkward bringing this up, but it's like I just want to be like genuine with this stuff. But yeah, like I noticed like I stopped or don't upload much to my tattoo Instagram just because that pressures, and I wanted my photography Instagram and stuff like that to be an outlet, just to be like, this is me, no pressure. And then sometimes I do feel a little bit of that pressure, but I'm just like, just remember like why you did this in the first place. I think staying true to yourself is like the
do it like your passion.
yeah
'Cause
exactly.
I find that now with a lot of social media. There's been a big sort of surge in underwater photography, like new underwater photographers since post-COVID. But you can see like a lot of the new guys are still very young. I'm only in early stages of my journey as well. I've only been doing it for about 6 years. And they're sort of starting out, but they're all using like the AI subject selection and the editing it the same way, like just making the background blue and desaturating the subject, and sort of they all sort of look the same rather than sort of using their own creativeness or like putting their own sort of personality on the imagery.
In a lot of photography, like street
Yeah.
photography, if you go and look at that, you're getting a lot of blue tones in street photography at the moment. If you're looking even at live music photography, a lot of people are coming up and using these fancy filters. It's like storytelling is being removed a lot, and people are going, oh, I like what that guy's doing, I'm just going to copy this guy. And then you're getting 20 guys copying this guy, and creativity is sort of, because it's such a saturated market now to what it was years ago, that creativity is a little bit disappearing, because people are like, oh, I like that guy, and then it's just snowballs, and then everyone does blue street photography, and then everyone does desaturated this, and I think that's just become a real thing because of social media.
Yeah,
100%.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. Hey, like storytelling is a very interesting point because that's sort of what I always try to aim to do, like with the commercial work and stuff. And then wildlife, it's like what story you're trying to tell. If it's like if you go into like a resort or something, it's like it's got a beautiful reef, so you need to have like beautiful reef, someone swimming with it, doing snorkeling or diving, whatever, but then connecting it to the resort. So like in one image, you can sort of tell the entire story or the reason why you want someone to go there. And I think it's similar to wildlife stuff too, like with behaviour. You want to try and capture that unique behaviour and tell the story of what's happening without having to explain it. And that's a challenge to do. But yeah, I think like definitely that's being lost, I think. But yeah.
It really is. People don't, like, as a photographer, I like to have a voice and I like to tell people the way I see the world, and you're probably both the same. But a lot of people, because I also teach a lot of workshops, and people just, well, I just want to take a pretty picture of a pretty girl and I don't really care about what story I'm trying to tell. And a lot of the times I go, your story's not making sense. And it doesn't make sense to me. So a lot of people don't really care about that aspect anymore. It's just they're seeking that online validation. Like you'll see it, especially with your aurora photography. I'm going to go out with my cell phone and take a selfie because I want everyone to like me. And I think
Yeah.
it's sort of, there's a bit of a shift into storytelling getting a little bit lost, unfortunately.
I definitely feel like, yeah, social media has got such a big influence with that. Like people just want to post fast content, so it removes that sort of that feeling, that story sort of thing that like that we like to convey. So yeah, kind of, I don't know, like I have
Yeah.
Yeah, like I feel like I don't use TikTok or anything, but I feel like I don't know. Ever since then, ever since like that whole like reel thing, it's been, I don't know. It's good and it's bad. Like as you mentioned before, like a necessary evil. It just feels like some things are like watered down now, and I think especially with AI and all that stuff, yeah, people are just missing that
Do you feel
sort of
like
thing.
it's asking too much of us as artists? Because I don't like making reels, but you feel like it's asking us too much. So
Well,
this
a
is
lot.
my art, but you need to do this, this, and this.
Yeah, I really do believe that, just because not everyone has the capacity to do that, and that's where like that whole pressure comes in. It's almost like social media in a way. Once again, it's good. I'm not against it or anything, because it's like brought these amazing sort of opportunities, but you know, not everyone's like, it just really can, it can really bring people down, and there's a lot of artists who are already, you know, self-critical, so it can just bring them down even further. So it's just, yeah, just got to be careful with that stuff, I feel. So yeah.
Did-
About being so self-critical, you're saying you started drawing at an extremely young age and everything like that with your tattoo artistry. Do you feel that that's what's given you your most edge on your attention to detail with your photography?
Good question. Sorry, I have to think about that actually. I mean, like, they kind of like go both hand in hand, I feel. So, I mean, like, so for example, photography, I've always been really intrigued by it. I used to actually really love, like, the first type of photography that I got into was actually macro photography. And then went into the birding stuff. But I think with like my tattooing and stuff like that, I think it's, so like with photography, sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to word this. Photography has helped with my tattooing in terms of composition and lighting and stuff, because that's something that I want to keep getting better at. And then, yeah, the other way, like, yeah, they go hand in hand sort of thing. So, but I don't know, as I've, you know, continued on with that journey, it's definitely helped more in terms of like detail, composition. Like, I do actually get asked that quite a fair bit, but it's just like such a big like thing. I'm just like, they kind of go hand in hand sort of thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm self-taught actually. Like I started, it was just before COVID, and I got talked into getting a camera by a few really good mates who are photographers on the Ningaloo. So I had them as mentors early on, but it was more the technical side of things, or just like tips here and there. You come back, oh, this is how you shoot this, or try doing this. But for the rest, I just sort of I get a bit obsessive. I think I have a bit of OCD or something, but I get a bit obsessive with things. But I remember when I first got the job, and I was like, oh, I can maybe make this work. I was due to start work as an underwater photographer on a tour, and then I got a coral spawn infection in my foot, and it like swelled up, and then so I couldn't work for like a couple of months, and I was in hospital, and then they thought I was going to lose my foot and things. I thought, right when I had this opportunity, it was like taken from me, you know. It's like maybe I'm not meant to be a photographer. But then I just used that time to like just deep dive into it. And for me, like for some reason, I really struggled to comprehend like exposure triangle. Like, for some reason, it was just like so complicated and this crazy different language. And nowadays, I look at it and like, oh, it's like understand it, so it's quite simple. And I think such a dummy back then, but I always try to keep that in mind when I'm like giving advice to people, you know, because I'm still very much learning myself. I don't think you ever stop learning, but yeah, like you can still self-teach yourself. And yeah, I don't know, I'm not much into school. I didn't really do that well at school. I couldn't pay attention, and I was a bit of a wild child, I think. But I think it's when, you know, if you really have a passion for something, as you know, you do like with tattoos and stuff, it's like you want to learn it, so you will learn those things. You'll find that information. These days with the internet, you can learn anything. Yeah,
100%.
I learned how to shuffle cards for poker off YouTube. You know, so I could play poker at the local club. You know, like you just like 10 minutes. Like how do you shuffle cards? Bang! It's amazing what you can learn doing that. But yeah, a lot of trial and error.
Yeah,
A
definitely.
lot of missed stuff. Like you know, yeah, always. It still happens now. I'm just like, you idiot. You know, like what were you doing? But yeah, all self-taught. How about
Yeah,
you?
self-taught as well. Basically, like just going out there and practicing, and yeah, there's so much information out there on Google and YouTube videos, and then like finding inspiration as well, and then trying to see what works. Like I still am learning a lot myself. Like even with just like the exposure comp, like I'm still just like, oh, how do I do this? Da da da. Like I'm always finding new things at like every time. So yeah.
And these days it's easy, eh? The mirrorless stuff, you get your live exposure on the camera. You
Yeah,
don't have to work for it
exactly.
anymore. You can
Yeah.
like literally, oh, it's too dark, I'm brighten it up. It's so easy. to do
Sorry, it just makes me think of one time. So I shot a wedding back in April, and I had to use had an incident with my camera, so I had to send it in, and I had to use 5D Mark IIIs from my R5. So it's like going from mirrorless back to DSLR. And it was so weird going back to like not being able to see the screen where it shows you what it actually will look like. And I was like, all right, got to go back again to like what I taught myself. And so I took the photo, And like, there's a huge, like so much good equipment out there nowadays that
It's
it's like,
wild, yeah. And the subject tracking now is like
It's
with the turtle photo for this competition, just like you said, it's animal tracking, bang, locks on the eye, gets it, like, it's so, but I use underwater, I don't know if you do it for birds and stuff as well, I use back button focus
Yes, I use
to
back button
control it.
focus as
And that was one of the things I really struggled to get used to when I transitioned. I hated it at first, but now I can't stand it if
Yeah,
the
if there's no-
focus is on the shutter. I find it harder now doing that than the back button thing. But
A few years ago, and now I can't go back.
I
yeah,
know, it's amazing.
Yeah.
So good.
I think we could go on and talk for hours here.
But we have actually been over an hour now,
Oh,
so
well, there you go.
I think that unfortunately, we might have to wrap it there. Thank you both so much. I think for us running APA, we're okay at looking at photos and seeing what makes a beautiful photo, but I think for us, especially in this animal category, having knowledge like what you guys have is just so fascinating for us. Not only the technical skills, but also the ethical skills about what it is to photograph animals and the conservation kind of work that you're doing as well. And I just want to thank you both so much for being here and being part of this weekend. Thank you for being on the judging committee, Christine. And Jake, congratulations again.
Thank you.
I think we'll be probably asking you to be a judge next year, so we'll wait for
Oh,
that phone
geez.
call. But thank you so much. And everyone, we've got one more talk to wrap up 2024's weekend in an hour, so grab some lunch and have a drink, and please come back for our final talk of the afternoon. But thank you both so much.
Thank you.